Alright, I am back with another video, and now we are doing the second build in my not Origin Companion, the regular Companion series, Minthara. We did Halcyon already, so it kind of just made sense for me to do Minthara next, as she's likely to be one of the characters you'd meet around the same time, and it's probably the second one you'll recruit, at least before, patch 6 or 5, I guess it technically was, but 6 fixed a bunch of bugs, where now you can recruit her in any playthrough. So I'm kind of glad I waited to do this series, because it's nice to be able to recruit Minthara both on a good and evil run. So, you get one of the best companions in the game pretty easily. Yes, Minthara is one of my personal favourites, and when me and the rest of the members of our community were building this on stream, it was quite interesting. I have never seen so much debate over how to build a character ever. Because Halcyon was pretty cut and dry. We knew he was going to be a Moon Druid, and Jaheira and Minsk were pretty much done deals as well, but Minthara was really tricky. We knew there was going to be Paladin in there somewhere, as per the rules of this series. I have to start with their original starting class. But the rest of it, man, was really tricky. There were some people who wanted to go for Rogue, some people who wanted to go for Ranger, some people who wanted to mix in Fighter, because there's so many different things about Minthara's character and her general, battle strategies that come with her normally, that it was really hard to narrow down one strategy. And there was a lot of debate going back and forth, and in the end, I actually had to bust out a straw poll and have a general vote on what Minthara should be, and this is what we came up with. And honestly, I'm pretty happy with it. It's a combination that I wasn't expecting to work, but when you consider what Minthara has going for her, including some of her unique abilities that are exclusive to her, the build that we came up with actually makes a ton of sense, and I'm really happy that we picked it up. But there are a ton of different ways you can build Minthara. A lot of them would make sense. In fact, if you're looking for other ideas, I would definitely check out the stream where we built these guys. It is a VOD on the channel. You just have to go to the little live section on the channel page and you can find it. And I'd highly recommend going through it because, again, Minthara is such a complex and widely diverse character, but there's so many things you could do with her. But this is what we landed on as a community, and it's a build that I'm quite proud of because I think it is really effective while still making use of what makes Minthara work. So, let's get into the build. No surprise here, as part of the rules of this series, I need to use the original starting class, so we're going to be going with Paladin. Paladin is going to give us a bunch of things that we want, our weapon and armor proficiencies, and of course our usual Paladin kit. As for our subclass, or our Oath, we are going with Oath of Vengeance. That's what she is by default, and it makes perfect sense for her character. Minthara's whole drive and motivation to join your party in the first place is to get revenge on the Absolute and the people who wronged her, namely the game's main antagonists, so the Oath of Vengeance makes sense. You could also spin Oathbreaker as well, if you take her leaving the Absolute to join your side as her breaking her oath to that organization, but we kind of decided that Oath of Vengeance is a bit more fitting, but if you like Oathbreaker, that absolutely works. Oath of Vengeance is going to give us Inquisitor's Might, allowing ourselves or an ally's weapons to deal an additional 3 radiant damage and can daze enemies for 1 turn for 2 turns. It's a bonus action, takes our channel oath. It's okay, probably not going to be using this one too much. As for our ability scores, they're going to look a little bit strange, I think, for people who know Minthara, but hear me out. We're going with Dexterity as our main weapon attacking stat. I think a lot of people would tend to use her with two-handed weapons, but we kind of decided that we liked a slightly different method that I'll get into later. Constitution is at 14, I still think it's a pretty happy middle ground for the levels we'll be going for. We'll have a decent chunk of HP by the end. Intelligence and Strength are both at 8, we don't need them. Wisdom is at 12, just for the saving throws. I do think Minthara can be quite wise, but maybe she's not as smart. She did kind of end up with the Absolute, and I know that's not her fault, mind control and all that. I don't know why I just said that. Minthara is smart. It's just stats. Ignore me. And Charisma is at 16 because obviously we're a Paladin. It is going to be our spell casting stat. As for our skill proficiencies, Minthara comes with, I'm not actually sure what background this is, but it gives us History and Persuasion, so that's quite neat. We're also going to be able to get Perception because she is a drow, and I've decided to pick up Intimidation and Religion. Intimidation makes a ton of sense because she's fucking Minthara, and Religion, I mean, she is kind of a religious person, between Lolth and the Absolute. She kind of knows her way around a church? The Absolute don't have churches, and I'm not sure Lolth does either, at least not on the surface world. Anyways, religion makes sense for her, but insight can also work. Next up, at level 2, we obviously get the main stuff we want from Paladin, and that is Divine Smite, allowing us to spend spell slots in order to deal a butt-ton of damage. We also get a fighting style, and we're not actually going to really be needing any of these. We're not going to be using a two-handed weapon, so great weapon fighting doesn't work for us. We're not going to be wielding only a weapon in one hand, so that's not really going to do it for us either. And then there's protection, so no. So defense kind of is our only option here. I mean, feel free to pick one of these other ones up if you maybe want to switch up the playstyle a little bit, but for what we're going for here, a nice little buff to our armor class won't go amiss. As for our spells, I mean, obviously we're playing a rather offensive Paladin. I want all of the Smite spells, especially Wrathful Smite, because Minthara comes packed in with Illithid powers, and as such, psychic damage is kind of her thing, so getting Wrathful Smite makes total sense. But of course I want Searing Smite, because this is also quite on theme for her. If we consider her unique Soul Branding ability, which does extra fire damage, I'll get more into that later. And of course Thunderous Smite is always nice to have as well. Compelled Duel and Command would be my other two choices. Minthara would absolutely challenge someone to fight her, and she was a commander, so it makes sense for her to, well, command. Overall, I think this is quite a nice spread. At Paladin level 3, we're going to be picking up some really important things for this build, and one of the main reasons I wanted to go Oath for Vengeance, namely Vow of Enmity, allowing us to gain advantage on attack rolls against a single enemy for 10 turns at the cost of our channel Oath. This is super important for the build. We're going to be wanting that advantage. We're also going to be getting some other stuff here, like Bane and Hunter's Mark, added to our spell list. Hunter's Mark is actually kind of nice. It's going to give us extra damage if we want it at the cost of our concentration, which most of the time we're not really going to be using on much else, so you might as well throw it up. We also, because we are a drow, we get Fairy Fire at this level, which is nice, and we get to prepare an extra spell. It's entirely up to you what you like. Shield of Faith could be another good concentration option. Same with Heroism, which the game has picked for us, which I'll probably go with, but it's a pick your poison situation. Minthara, look this way. Thank you. At Paladin level 4, we're going to be picking up our first feat, and all I want to do is bump up that Dexterity. It is our main attacking stat. Less worried about the Charisma score with this build. I mean, 16 is usually okay for Paladin stuff, as you're mainly going to want to be using just regular Divine Smite with this build, and the other stuff is kind of utility-based. Or, I mean, I guess we have spell save DC stuff, but you're mainly going to be smiting, let's be real here. So, let's continue with our Dexterity and just beef that shit up. Next up, at Paladin level 5, we're finally going to be getting extra attack, meaning now we can attack twice per turn with our action, which, you know, I mean, you know what that does. But another really important thing we're going to get here is Darkness. We can only use it once per long rest, but being able to blind creatures is going to be super important for us, as it's another way of gaining advantage. As for our prepared spells, we do get to pick level 2 spells at this point, and I definitely want Branding Smite. She literally has a kind of thing around branding. It's kind of her theme, like branding herself, branding other things. I mean, yeah, Branding Smite makes sense here. And as for your other spell, you can pick up whatever you like. Again, if you're not really focusing on concentrating on too much else, if you're not really using these spells too much, then Magic Weapon could just be a nice concentration spell to have, just giving your weapon a +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls. I mean, I usually don't recommend this because usually there's better concentration options, but for this build, it's actually not too bad, so sure, why not? And now we're going to be leaving Paladin. Vengeance Paladin doesn't get some of the better aura stuff. In fact, it doesn't even get a secondary aura like the other ones, the other oaths. It gets Relentless Avenger, giving you more movement speed, which is okay, but I kind of want other stuff more. So we're going to be heading on over to Rogue. Yes, Rogue. We are using dexterity-based finesse weapons, which means sneak attack is going to work. And for those of you that don't know, sneak attack and divine smite stack. You can use them in tandem, which means if we go to higher levels in Rogue, which we're going to want to do with this build because it's going to give us a nice utility, we're going to get a lot of damage off. So let's do it. We're going to get, so like I say, we're going to get sneak attack as well as a couple, an extra skill proficiency and a couple of expertise. I absolutely want intimidation expertise, 100%. And I kind of like picking up acrobatics here just because I don't like being shoved around, but anything else here will work just fine. But getting expertise in persuasion and intimidation is kind of nice. It's entirely up to you. At Rogue level 2, we're going to be picking up our Cunning Action, Hide, Dash, and Disengage. Cunning Action, Dash is going to be extremely important for this build, giving us some maneuverability that close-range melee fighters like us absolutely love, so I'm quite happy to have it here. At Rogue level 3, somehow I blanked on the name there, we get to choose our subclass, and I mean, we're not doing... I mean, there's a couple of things we could go with. There was another debate that we actually had to have between what rogue subclass. We'd already decided that we wanted rogue, but what subclass were we going to pick? It was between thief and assassin. Assassin has some properties that we quite like, for example, guaranteed critical hits for something like a paladin who likes divine smite. That's very nice, as well as being able to regain our action economy as soon as combat starts, so we can get a critical hit divine smite and then immediately go back into full combat. And also gaining advantage on attack rolls against creatures that haven't taken a turn yet. Again, another way to get advantage is really nice. But there's something else we wanted more, and that's that second bonus action. And again, you'll see why when we get into the equipment and abilities later. But that second bonus action is going to be super useful for this whole build. You'll understand. Trust me, it makes sense. I know it's kind of the meta pick, but it does make sense for Minthara here. And people that just, and I know, and there was some thing in the chat where like, well, she's not a thief, it goes against her character, and I'm like, well, you don't have to actually flavour it as a thief. It's not her being a thief, it's her being a dexterous martial fighter. That's just it. Not everything has to be what it says on the tin. Use your imagination. Next up at Rogue level 4, we get to pick up another feat, and I'm going to be the most boring person on earth and just max out our dexterity. Again, this is the stat I care most about. This is going to make our sneak attacks huge, our divine smites huge. It's going to make everything huge. So we absolutely want to just max this thing out and have a lot of damage. At Rogue level 5, we get to pick up Uncanny Dodge. When an attack, I believe this is only once per turn? I don't know, this is just, there. 1 second, everybody, there's going to be a weird cutter because I have forgotten things. Okay, yep, I was right. This happens once per round, but there's a little bit of weirdness to it. So Uncanny Dodge does use your reaction, but it doesn't actually appear in the reaction menu. But basically, once per round, you can use your lightning quick reflexes to protect yourself. When an attack hits you, you only take half the usual damage. We don't have a lot of reaction-based stuff here anyway, so it's not really going to matter for us. So just having that extra bit of tankiness on a frontline fighter is really nice. Yeah, I don't know why. I kind of had to remember if it was once per round, and yes, it is. I don't know why I thought it was maybe like once per short rest or something, but yes, it is once per round. Sorry for that, everyone. I should probably do my research before I record. You know what? I've been doing this for like 6 months now. I still don't fully research things. I'm really bad at this. Ugh. I just turn on the camera and say go. Anyways, at Rogue level 6, we're going to be able to get some more skill expertise, and I quite like picking up religion here. Again, she is a bit of a religion person, and it's up to you what else you kind of want. I think acrobatics could be nice just to make you completely immovable from being pushed. Getting that plus 13 to it, it might be slightly overkill. You might want to pick up something else, but I quite like this here. Again, that's all we get at this level. Whoop-de-doo. And at Rogue level 7, which is going to be our final level, we're going to get Evasion. Whenever a spell or effect would deal half damage on a successful saving successful dexterity saving throw. There you go. It deals no damage if you succeed and only half if you fail. Basically now, we have even more tankiness against a lot of spells like Fireball. Overall, we've made ourselves pretty tanky. Yes, our HP isn't the highest, but the ability to cut damage in half and be able to maybe even not take damage from spells at all, it's actually really nice. So overall, this build is quite tanky. You get a lot of tanky stuff out of Rogue. It's really interesting. And the main reason we also wanted to go to Rogue level 7 is we've now hit a pretty decent tier of Sneak Attack, one of the higher damage tiers you can get, so it's really going to beef ourselves up. So, that's the end of the levels. And that is the build. So, with this, you're going to be getting a really tanky and powerful frontline fighter. Sneak Attack, which, as I said before, is now a 4d6, which is quite nice. Topped off with Divine Smite that can deal quite a bit of damage when they're stacked together, and they do stack together. You can deal a lot of damage. We also have a lot of ways of getting advantage between Darkness, Vow of Enmity, all of that sort of thing. We get some extra things like Misty Step and Hold Person, which can make all our attacks guaranteed to be critical hits if you're against a humanoid. get fucked, Gortash. And also, just again, we just have a bunch of utility. We have high movement speed thanks to our rogue levels. We have a lot of, weapon and armor proficiency, so you can wear heavy armor, which is what we're doing here if you want to be tanky. And, of course, Minthara herself gets an ability unique to her, that being Soul Branding, and this is quite important for the build. Bestow the Absolute's Flames on a creature. Its movement speed increases by 1.5 meters, and the next attack deals an additional 3 to 9, fire damage. This condition ends upon landing a successful attack, or if you don't attack, it lasts 3 turns. So this is Minthara's unique soul branding ability, and it essentially allows us to, for free, as long as we have a bonus action, buff up our attacks. There's no once per turn, once per short rest, once per long rest limit on this. As long as you have bonus actions, you can keep doing it. So the idea is, yes, we're dual wielding, but these 2 bonus actions can be used to buff up our main actions even further, that of ourselves or our allies. So we now have 2 attacks that are going to be dealing extra fire damage, so it was a nice way to incorporate Minthara's basic abilities. So you tack on that fire damage with Divine Smite, Sneak Attack, you're going to be having a good time. But let's get into the actual equipment. Now, we'll start off with the weapons. I have gone for the Justicia's Scimitar, which is a +2 scimitar, so a light finesse weapon, which whenever we attack with advantage, which remember we're doing a lot, you have a chance of blinding the target. Blinded targets have disadvantage on attack rolls, and the range of their attacks and spells are reduced to 3 meters, and attack rolls against them have advantage. So you're just building up more advantage. It also comes with a unique weapon attack called Shadow Soaked Blow, allowing you to strike an enemy, adding your proficiency bonus to the damage, and moreover, if it hits, it deals an additional 1d6 psychic damage, and this attack doesn't break concealment, so if you do manage to get the jump on your foes, it's pretty decent. Only usable once per short rest, like all weapon skills, but hey, it's nice as a pretty big Nova attack. If you manage to hit a critical hit on this, and apply your sneak attack and your Divine Smite at the same time, on top of the extra damage from this and the extra damage from Soul Branding, oh boy, that's a lot of damage right there. We're also going to be adding on to this with the Render of Mind and Body in the offhand. Since we're kind of using our bonus action more for soul branding, I kind of wanted a buffing weapon in the offhand, and while this weapon will still do a good job as an attacking weapon, it mainly is here for its ability. When the wielder attacks with advantage, they deal an additional 1d8 psychic damage, so now we're adding even more damage to our main attacks, which is just flat out insane. As for our ranged weapon slot, I've gone with the Dead Shot, allowing us to reduce the number we need to roll a critical hit while attacking by 1, and this effect can stack with other similar effects. Basically, this just means that now we have a higher chance to crit, which means that we have a higher chance for high damage, sneak attacks and divine smites, so that's pretty nice. But this also comes with another ability, since unlike my last build, we can actually use this weapon. The wielder doubles their proficiency bonus when rolling ranged attacks with this weapon, unless they have disadvantage, which we never really should, and it's a +2 bow, so it's going to give you a lot of options at range as well, because soul branding works also on ranged attacks, so if you need to, you can use it, and you will have seen in the combat footage, if it got far enough in that we got to the second Steel Watcher, you will see that the bow came in very handy in a certain situation. Now, let's get into the actual equipment itself, because there's a lot to talk about here. First up, we have Sevarok's Horned Helmet. Now, the idea we kind of went for with Minthara is that she kind of collects trophies, especially against the people that wronged her, but just generally powerful enemies as well. So she kind of ended up picking some pieces of gear from bosses. Sevarok's Horned Helmet allows her to gain extra dark vision, reduces the number she needs to roll a critical hit by 1 again, so now we critical hit on an 18 or higher, and she cannot be frightened or affected with other emotion altering conditions, which is just perfect for Minthara. And while this is an Act 3 option after a pretty hard boss fight, so in the meantime you can use the Dark Justicia Helmet. You have a +1 bonus to saving throws against spells, and while obscured, the number you need to roll a critical hit while attacking is reduced by 1. Basically a slightly worse version of Sevarok's Helmet, but we can obscure ourselves, if you remember correctly, with Darkness and also another ability that we'll be picking up through the Cloak of Cunning Broom. Whenever we disengage, which remember we can do using one of our 2 bonus actions, we also create a foggy cloud within a 2-meter radius of us that lasts for a turn, essentially allowing us to make ourselves obscured whenever we want, and also being able to disengage quite easily because we'll be making our enemy's vision obscured as well. And again, this can kind of work a bit like a Diet Darkness to kind of get off some of those advantage hits, basically for free, so that's kind of nice. But if you don't care so much for that, especially since it's a bit weird fashion-wise with kind of what I've gone for here, then the Nymph Cloak is a good replacement if you want to lean more into the Illithid theme. This will allow you to cast Dominate Person once per long rest. Yes, allowing you to basically mind control an enemy, leaning into the Illithid side of things, which he absolutely does have. Next up, taking the piece of armor from from one of the people who wronged her the most, Reaper's Embrace, Catheric Forms Armor. This allows all incoming damage dealt to Minthara to be reduced by 2, so now we're even tankier, and it also comes with Reaper's Rigidity. When activated, you cannot be moved against your will by any spell or action, but have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. If you decide you don't want to wear this one, specifically for that, then I do have another option here that I think works quite nicely, but just the idea of her taking Ketheric's armor after the fight is so nice. As for our gloves, these ones are kind of required as we are dual wielding, but not, I guess not really. I will remind everyone that this is following my Origin build series rules, in which I cannot repeat equipment used on other builds, so that all these builds can be used in the same playthrough. So I was a little bit limited for options, especially since we're so far down the line now. So I kind of had to pick and choose. The gloves of the balanced hands allow us to get 2-weapon fighting without having to take a dip into fighter, allowing us to make an attack with our offhand weapon and add the ability modifier to the damage of the attack, like a main hand attack. But again, since we're kind of using our main bonus action more for buffing, you can swap this out if you like. But if you want to be able to dual wield as well and use that offhand attack when necessary, then this is how you do it with full power. But if you're not sticking to my Origin build rules and you don't want to use all of those, so you have equipment from those other builds, then I'm sure there's something that'll fit better on here, perhaps the Helldust gloves. But for now, the gloves of the balanced hand are a decent option. And in a similar vein, we have the Line Breaker boots. Once per turn, whenever you dash, which remember, we can do quite often with our bonus actions, we gain Wrath for 2 turns, so Minthara gets a little bit angry. And Wrath will give us a +1 bonus to damage with melee weapons for every turn the condition has remaining. So if you quickly dash twice with a bonus action, you're going to get like a +4 to your damage with your melee weapons, which is kind of sick. So yeah, I mean, it's a fun little option, so, you know, feel free to use it. As for our accessories, I have picked up the Pearl of Power Amulet, which allows us to restore any spell slot up to level 3 once per long rest as an action, so you get an extra Divine Smite basically, because unfortunately with the way this build works, we do only get level 2 spell slots, but when it comes to power, this is more than enough. As for the ring we have here, I've gone for the Ring of Poison Resistance. Drow and Minthara as well do tend to work with poison quite a bit, so it makes sense that they may build up somewhat of an immunity to it. And again, I was kind of limited for options here, so you have to forgive me. The Ring of Poison, but having a nice resistance to poison damage, which won't come up too often but can come up, is nice to have, but feel free to swap this out for whatever you like. And finally, the Eversight Ring, preventing us from being blinded, so we're not affected by our own darkness if we want to use that to gain advantage. I was surprised I hadn't used up this ring yet, so it was nice to throw it on a build that made sense. If you want an alternative to the Pearl of Power Amulet, though, we do have the Surgeon's Subjugation Amulet. Once per long rest when scoring a critical hit, which we should be able to do fairly frequently, you can paralyze the target for 2 turns. It's okay. I kind of flavored it as putting like a Drow poison on your blade that paralyzes people, but overall, it's not that great. I kind of prefer the Pearl of Power Amulet here, but if you've already used its effect, you might as well swap this in. And finally, I did forget to mention this earlier, but an alternative armor we can pick up is the Cerebral Citadel armor, meaning that we have an immunity to being frightened, which is nice. If the wearer is infested by a Mind Flayer tadpole, which we are, they gain a +1 bonus to Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws, and it's a decent chunk of heavy armor. Overall, this is mainly here as an alternative if you don't want to use Ketheric's armor, as I feel like it fits nice fashion-wise, and if we're focusing on the Illithid stuff, I mean, damn, that actually looks pretty good. In fact, if I put the Cloak Cutting Broom back on, yeah, that actually looks really cool. So I think it's nice fashion-wise, but I feel like Reaper's Embrace is more fitting overall. So yeah, I believe that's everything. As you'll see in the combat footage that I'll be showing now, and I will have shown at the beginning of the video, this build shreds. It's very resource dependent. You're going to be burning through those spell slots pretty quickly, so you might want to be slightly more conservative and only use them for big bosses, but when you get to throw down, you get to throw down, dealing an absolute ton of damage with Sneak Attack and Divine Smite stacked on top, being able to pop Soul Branding on absolutely everything you do, and having a million and one ways to gain advantage. you're just going to be pretty unstoppable. You're very, very tanky. This is one of my first combat showcases where I actually jumped from one Steel Watcher fight straight into the next, and I burned all my spell slots on the first fight and was still able to, you know, outlast and deal decent damage to the second fight as well. So I feel like it works out quite nicely overall. Basically getting that extra bit of sneak attack damage on every turn was great. Again, I do test these on the Steel Watchers because I have yet to find a decent encounter that I think can accurately show off other builds. But, of course, that comes with the caveat that Steel Watchers are resistant to everything and have a bunch of damage reduction, so it makes the builds look kind of underpowered in comparison, but in reality, they do a lot of damage. It's just Steel Watchers in particular are quite tanky, especially when they completely nullify psychic damage as well, which is a decent portion of this build's damage. We are missing out on a whole 1d8 of damage every time we attack. So, when you think about it, this build really can shred if it was able to be this effective against two enemies that are really a poor matchup for it, but that's maybe just me making excuses. If anybody else has a decent encounter that would be good for testing single characters that exists in Act 3, let me know. Because really, encounters with lots of different characters, I mean, single characters just get shredded immediately anyway, because they're meant for a full party, and one-on-one encounters are brilliant, but they're few and far between. The Steel Watchers I've shown here are really the only ones that have a decent amount of power, so it's kind of hard to say, and again, trying not to spoil anybody either. I think this is at least the kind of least spoilery way I can do it. I don't really want to test these on like a boss fight or something that's going to be spoilers for people. So, I mean, if anybody has a decent encounter in mind, let me know. As for channel stuff, not too much to talk about here. Still kind of just coasting along. I'm keeping on this like grind of trying to get some extra videos out. But I'm thinking this Sunday I'm going to try something a bit different. I'm going to try doing something that's actually been long requested for the channel, and that is modded builds. Because up till now, for the Sunday videos, I was doing D&D builds, which, I mean, yeah, they're harder to make. I'm not actually, as much as I enjoyed having that creative freedom, the actual process of making a D&D build and then a video based on it is not as fun as just making something on Baldur's Gate 3. And what I was doing with the D&D builds is I was making them so that they could be modded into Baldur's Gate 3. So why don't I just do the reverse? Why don't I make Baldur's Gate 3 modded videos that can easily be translated into D&D? So that is the plan. I'm going to try doing modded builds. If you join my Discord, that I have always linked in the description, I have made a new specific channel for people to link mods that they would like me to showcase in their videos. I'm primarily sticking to classes and subclasses right now, but, you know, I think they would be quite fun to work with. So now I'm going to be trying out some modded builds. So this means we get access to things like Hexblade, Bladesinger, Artificer even. Like, the options are pretty out there, and I think it's actually going to be really fun, because it lets me stay pretty close into my comfort zone, sticking within Baldur's Gate 3 rules, but also being able to really expand, so I'm actually really looking forward to it. Obviously, there will be a big disclaimer at the start that the builds themselves are modded, but I'm actually really looking forward to it as a prospective thing, so please feel free to join the Discord and suggest some modded classes and subclasses you would like to see. Heck, even classes that aren't from Dungeons & Dragons are totally acceptable here. Even somebody suggested the Magus class from Pathfinder, which I'm quite interested in like, kind of doing. And there's even, like, I know there's some, like, Final Fantasy classes and such like that, so there's a few things I would actually quite like to try. So, please, send in your submissions there, and, I mean, just being a part of our community is fun. Join the Discord, come to the streams, you know, we have a ton of fun here. And speaking of streams, apologies that there was no stream last week. It was Mother's Day here in the UK, and I had some family obligations. So, you know, couldn't really stream on a Sunday, and I was busy on the Saturday because I have other stuff going on. I am a busy human being at the end of the day who works a full-time job as well as managing this YouTube channel. Yeah, so, but I promise, I 100% swear there is going to be a stream this weekend. I'm not 100% sure what it's going to be yet. I mean, it probably is going to be another deity build stream, as this weekend's deity build, Leviatar, not this weekend, sorry, this Friday's deity build, Leviatar, is the last one I have actually ready, so I want to get you guys involved and get that made. So, yeah, we'll probably do another deity build livestream this weekend, so feel free to join in if you want to be a part of that series. I rambled on a little bit longer because I know the combat footage is longer and I wanted to show it all off, but I think I am going to go for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.